Okay.
Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks very much for coming again to our talks. This time we are with Bashar Tabbah. We are very excited for this talk. Let me very briefly remind you of what we do here in these in our sessions in our platform for traditional architecture. So everything traditional architecture, that's the kind of tentative name at the moment, is focused on traditional architecture with all its facets, meaning we're focusing on traditional arts, crafts, the city, traditional urban planning. And we're trying to look from the perspective of tradition at tradition. And with that spirit in mind, we're bringing in speakers to that platform to cover different areas. Today, we're going to be talking about a magnificent city for so many people around the world, but specifically for the Islamic tradition, since we focus in our basically platform here on the traditional Islamic tradition, has a very, very significant place. So today we're going to be looking at that city from a very unique perspective, from the perspective of Bashar, obviously, but someone who knows the city quite well and has spent a lot of time. I don't want to take words from him. He can basically tell us about his experience. But I welcome everybody, and we're very happy to have you here. And inshallah, we'll continue to have these series, and as we grow our platform into different areas as well, not just this series or these set of interviews, but we're planning also maybe to expand the platform a bit further than that. We have some kind of a vision for that. With that, I give my co-host the mic to present our speaker. And yeah, enjoy the talk. I think it will be a wonderful one.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. Thank you, Bashar, and thank you everyone for coming. I will give you now a small description now about who Bashar is. Very brief one, of course. Bashar is a multicultural Levantine British photographer, traveler, and author. Bashar's passion for photography, exploration, and history has dominated his life. Growing up in Jordan, surrounded by its historical treasures, has strongly influenced his interests and outlook. Since 2004, mashallah, he has traveled extensively and photographed hundreds of historical locations worldwide. He primarily focuses on sites in historical and cultural significance and has published and collaborated on several books over the past decade, mashallah. With that very, very brief description, Bashar, the mic is on to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly and you can see the presentation well. I put this presentation together recently as a sort of like introduction to my work in Jerusalem. And I managed to give the talk in London last month, and I modified it for you guys out here. This is going to be basically a journey. I like to call these shows like I call them show and tells, because like basically I get to show you my photography and tell you stories along the way. And like I said, the emphasis is going to be on my journey alongside Jerusalem. Now, I broke this into small sections, so we can start from like the first section. Can we all see that? In each section, I decided to like add a little like poem or line that I found I related to heavily when it came to this project and my my experiences with Jerusalem. Now, just so you know, like I mentioned earlier, like I'm Jordanian, Levantine. When everybody asks me where I'm from, I tell them ana min bilad al-Sham. I'm from the Levant, and my mother is English, but I grew up here all my life, and in a way, I see myself as I recently learned this term, a cultural broker, because I feel like I'm halfway between both worlds, and it puts me in a very unique position in which I can, glide seamlessly through both. And so, my focus has been on the region and things like this. So, but like did grow up with a very English influence. So, like the Mahmoud Darwish poem says here, like I think in two languages and I dream in them. Now, moving on, growing up in Jordan, I spent a lot of my time out here. And, for the first 20 years or more of my life, this is the view I saw of Palestine. And this is a thing that we see, like a lot of people have, a lot of the Arab diaspora, a lot of people who are unable to go there. Palestine is seen through screens, through photos, through books, through videos on their phones, things like this. Nobody actually gets to go there. And, for me, growing up, we would sit in my parents' farm and my mom would point out, like, look, that's Jerusalem, that's Jericho, this is it. And here's a beautiful view of the actual city of Jerusalem from Jordan. That's the Dead Sea below. And that circle thing that you see down there is actually a settlement. But you can actually see the city. Day in, day out, we used to be able to see it, but we never really approached it. And there was the other thing of like where this is another view of Palestine in the north. That's the Golan Heights, the Galilee Sea. And like I said, like I grew up, being surrounded. My father was born in Jerusalem. I grew up in Jordan, which is 60 plus. Depends on who you ask. The percentage of people who live here are Palestinian, but like heavily involved in the community throughout my life and influenced by it. And but the really interesting thing for me was it was always this land that was far away. Like there was a fog of war. I think Alaska and the North Pole was closer to me and I had a clearer vision of it than actual Palestine. Until about this one day in January 2009, my mother took me to the newly opened, baptism sites, in which I stood here and I took this photograph. And for the first time in my life, I was like, that's Palestine right there. That 5 meters away, that bank there is Palestine. And it just opened up this world for me. And in that moment in 2009, I was like, I've been visiting Damascus, which I was passionately in love with, and going around to Cairo and Egypt and doing tours around, but I never set my sights on Palestine. And I thought at that moment in 2009, I was like, this is the place I want to go. It took me a while because conflict and intimidation and propaganda gets in the way when these things like you keep on you hear things and you say to yourself, why would I want to cross, why wouldn't I want to go, and like there's another war, they're fighting, it's very difficult to try to push yourself. But then one day in 2012, a friend of a family had reached out to me, a family friend, and he said to me, like, I'm heading out to Jerusalem tonight, do you want to come? And it just moved me, and I was like, you know what? Let's do this. I've read so much about this place, and I missed so many opportunities to go out there that I had to go. And I had someone safe to go with, so like who had experienced in crossing the border and dealing with it, so he could teach me. And we headed out. And I remember this is the first moment I actually I got in at 11:52 p.m. on the 26th of August 2012, put my bags in the hotel and went straight to the old city. Got my camera out and I just started to wander. And it was absolutely incredible, because I had been reading about these places, and I spent the next 4 hours just walking around the old city at night. And I think it was a very unique thing for me because, Jerusalem's a very busy city and it's got always full of tourists and it's very, active. But for me, my first introduction to the place was wandering the streets very quietly. And, I had read, books on books and watched documentaries about the city for so long that I knew where I was going, and I had mapped it out in my head, and I just wandered the city. And I would say to myself, I need to go to find this place, this, Mamluk school. It's around the corner from here. Let's go check out this landmark. And I would just wander the city for hours. And it really left a mark on me, it felt very much like Damascus in a way, which had been closed off to me since the civil war started out there. And as I was wandering around, I was taking, seeing small scenes. This is a picture of the quote unquote Armenian quarter near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and you see these people wandering around, like the local residents, and it was just this magical experience. At one point, I think around 2:00 in the morning, I was like, let's go check out the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I walked in and the doors were absolutely open. Then I took this photograph. And the interesting thing about this photograph is the Mosque of Umar, which is the legendary story of Umar al-Khattab, who refused to pray inside the mosque, prayed outside, and they built a mosque on it. It's the lights of the mosque are shining across on the building here. But you can also see how the city is sort of like a living, breathing space. And this is something that I found that I encountered in Damascus and in Jerusalem, where a lot of places, they sort of time stops for them. A lot of landmarks or places or historical places, time stops. But in this case, these places, the living, breathing people who are still active and moving around in these cities are a part of the history. And so like during this time, I would continue moving around, and like I spent like 4 or 5 days just going around exploring, photographing. I got introduced to the Aqsa Mosque complex, which was one of the most amazing places. I will move on to that and tell you more about it later. But I got to meet people and explore. And like back in 2012, things were quite calm. So at one point, I'm going to go jump ahead a slide and then come back. At one point, the driver said to me, like, his cousin works at the complex, and he was like, "I can get you in." And like, this is the third night I've been to Jerusalem, and I actually got access to visit the mosque at night, which was incredible. And I got to meet a lot of the people there. This photograph here, obviously on the left you see like the people interacting with the site, but on the right I wanted to include this small picture because one thing I want to separate between other Levantine cities and this and Jerusalem, of course we all know this, is that it's a city under occupation. And the atmosphere is palpable. You feel it. The moment you cross the border into Palestine, you feel this weight on your shoulders, and especially in Jerusalem. Like I could tell, I'm going to share some stories while I talk here, but like you see things constantly. You feel the pressure. There's constantly children. I call them kids with guns roaming around, young kids with zits on their face with guns bigger than them, bullying the local residents. So here in this photograph, inside the Aqsa Mosque back in 2012, they had a cabinet where they collected all the smoke bombs, the rubber bullets, and they would just leave them there for people to come in and see. Since then, it's gone. Visiting the place, it left a very impressive mark on me. And like for me, like having Damascus and Syria closed off as access for me, I turned to Jerusalem. And it was just this place that like left a mark on me, and I knew that I wanted to explore it further and further as years went by. Now, around 2000, like between 2014 and 2017, I had published a book about Jordan, in which I documented maybe 120 of its cultural and historic and religious sites. And when the project was finished and I published my book, I was left, wondering what I should do next. But as a photographer, and as a historical photographer, you often, find yourself with, insane amounts of things to photograph. And so one of my projects that I really want to do was I want to do a Mosques of the World project. And I had started around the world, and I built this beautiful list. And my first return after 2012 was back to Palestine in 2017 to go around Palestine and document its mosques. So the big focus was to go back to the Aqsa Mosque complex, spend like a good week or two there, just documenting the mosque for this book. And I ended up going back and having just an absolutely incredible time roaming the streets of Jerusalem, but also coming and exploring this site. And the really interesting thing that emerged from my exploration of this site, when we just on a side note, we can go back and talk about the architecture in a bit, but the Aqsa Mosque, because touching on the idea of like this is a city under occupation, the Aqsa Mosque complex is a 144-acre park, school, museum, mosque, religious center. And it's a place, I describe it as, it's a place where Palestinians go to for some peace and calm from the chaos beyond its walls. And as I was going around, you see people like just escaping and using it as a small, as a space for relaxation, as a space for meditation, as a space for education. I want to go jumping back about the architecture. The other beautiful thing about Jerusalem is it's insanely layered. You have layers upon layers upon layers of history, and because it's such an important, the third holiest site in Islam, every ruler, every dynasty, every caliphate wanted to leave its mark on this place, especially the complex. So, for example, in this photo alone, the windows in the back are part of the later Umayyad or Abbasid reconstruction of the mosque after a major earthquake. You see a Mamluk gateway, which is known as Al-Khadr gateway, but then you have a rose window from the Crusader period when they reused the structure as a palace. So, like there's all these layers, and like every corner, every bit of stone is usually reused and remade and refashioned in different ways. And like, you'll have random inscriptions on different buildings, or, different rulers would come in and change things. Here's another example. For example, this is the interior of the southern mosque, which is the actual al-Aqsa mosque. It's got multiple names. Just on a tangent, the Aqsa Mosque complex is considered in its entirety a mosque. So whenever you play, you're playing in the mosque. But there are many structures. There's about 100 structures located throughout it, from museums to schools, as I mentioned, to prayer rooms to workshops. This is the central, we call it the masqufa, the covered mosque in the south, or the Qibli mosque, because this is the one that's pointing towards the Qibla. And you can see elements of restoration and reconstruction and, like ancient. So on the right, you see the Fatimid or Umayyad, mosaic decoration over the arch. But then you have Mamluk re-inscriptions added on top. That's why it's not really like parallel. But then you have the ceiling, which was burnt down in 1969 by a fanatic and reconstructed by the Hashemites. So there's constantly growth, but more and layering when it comes to these things. And so going back to what I was saying, I was exploring the site, but something I noticed as I was, exploring the sites and going through the cities, that, like I said, the people, they would go and spend hours, they would read Quran, they would have picnics, they would just hang out, and the space felt safe, even though, as we know in the news, it's constantly, the settlers come in, the Israelis come in, there's security forces coming in, but on average, the place is a safe space. And I ended up spending the whole time going through the details. Like I said, there's layers upon layers. Like, for example, here's the Golden Dome of the Rock. The dome was gilded during King Hussein's era, so I think in 70s, 80s, or possibly earlier. But then, you have the Ottoman era beautiful tiles, followed by the Umayyad era marbling on the bottom. So you can see the layers as they go on. And of course, the committee to take care of this, which is a shared Palestinian Jordanian committee, there's constant renovation and development. I'll point it out later on, but you see, there's they take care to maintain the historical and the historical aspects of the site, but also while developing it in a way that makes it more accessible to the people of the city. Here's samples of the interior of the Dome of the Rock, where you can see brand new restored mosaics from the Umayyad era. And just going back a bit, you can see the layering. So the ceiling is Ottoman, whereas the mosaics is what do you call it? Umayyad. And then you have the sort of the banding, the writing on the sides is Mamluk. So like I said, people are coming in and they're layering and layering. Going back to this, you just see the sort of, I started as I was photographing and documenting this mosque and others, I was leaving the city and going over to around other mosques around the country. But as I was photographing, I started to notice the daily life, the moments, and they were just framed so beautifully around it. And I was so impressed with how the Palestinians, living in Jerusalem, the Jerusalemites, lived under occupation. Even like I said, I felt it. It's Jerusalem, the old city, still has about 80 to 90% Palestinian people, the locals living it still. But it has the most cameras in the world. It has, there's people patrolling it, armed people constantly patrolling it. You feel the oppressive nature, and I was just really impressed with the resilience of just their daily lives. As you walked around. Now, I wanted to branch out a little bit and talk about some a really interesting thing as I learned as I walked around the city. I share here 3 street signs, and this is a very interesting thing to show you the multicultural aspect of Jerusalem. when the Jordanians were in charge of the old city in the 60s, they initiated a project where they hired Armenian, I think, second generation refugees from the Armenian genocide, to who came in, and they were tile merchants and tile creators, and they commissioned them to write signs throughout the old city and basically put names up for all the streets. But this is like a very interesting fact I'm going to show you here. Basically, the center image is, you can see the original Jordanian commission, which is Arabic and then English in a box. And then, of course, when the occupation took over, they needed to leave their mark on it, in which they added Hebrew on top. And as you move around the city, you'll see the signs moving so, and you can tell what era the sign was made in that period, because the primary language will be on top. So, in the middle picture, the Via Dolorosa, you'll see the Hebrew on top, but on the right, I don't have a picture here, but if you see the English on top, you'll see it's from almost the same time the Jordanians took over. Or if it's Arabic on top, it's actually directly from the Jordanian period. And just seeing this, and then, for example, there's another addition with the occupation where they try to modify names. So if you look at the image on the left, you'll see they tried to change the name of the thing, but the locals have come in and fought against that and corrected it, for example. And you see this happening all over. So the occupation exists in multiple layers, and even on the minutest fashion, there's a there's a way of trying to change the names of different streets and make it more Hebrew, or take away the identity of the local streets so they can sort of move in. I have a picture of a cat. I'm in love with cats, so I always have to include the wildlife and the cats that live in the old city. Of course, it's it's an Arabic city, and it's got to have lots of cats in there. But one of the stories I like to share about this is that the Haram used to have a lovely man called Ghassan Yunus, who spent his entire life driving from the north of Palestine down to al-Aqsa to feed the cats. And he was known as Abu Huraira because he would just come in and take care of them, and because he treated them as an aspect. And I know previous talkers in their presentations mentions cats in Arabic cities, and they are really truly important to us and things. Sadly, Ghassan passed away to COVID, and I never got to actually photograph him, but I did meet him when I first went back in 12. So after I finished that project, I went back to Jordan, continued working on more. I traveled the world. I've already finished about 45 mosques out of a list of 100. But that being a huge project, I just put it. I take up opportunities to photograph. My next big visit was in 2019, and I was so impacted by the people of Palestine, of Jerusalem, and how, like I said, how they deal with the occupation, how their their existence is also resistance in a manner. That I participated in an exhibition in Jordan, which was about people and places, I think it was, and I decided that I would go back to Jerusalem and photograph and document life out there, just snapshots, and just explore for myself and for others, and just the interaction, and the juxtaposition of these things. So I'm really passionate about this stuff, and I like the snapping these moments, of it. So I went back and I photographed life out there, and I spent a good month coming and going, exploring, seeing people, and I get meeting these people. One thing you might notice, I forgot to point out in the first picture that I photographed of this gate. This is Damascus Gate, by the way, and it's also called Bab al-Amud, Ottoman era reconstruction of the gate. If you see that tower down in the bottom, there's two stories to this picture. The first thing is, when I first went in 2012, there was no tower. This is a security occupation watch tower. And they stop Palestinians, ask them for their IDs, and it's just sort of we're here, and it's also to stop any sort of protest happening out here. But the other thing that you'll notice is that there's a banister that behind the people near the gate. This gate is obviously one of the primary entrance ways for the Palestinians in West Jerusalem to enter, and a lot of the farmers from around Jerusalem have been doing this for the past 200 years. They come in and they sell their wares, their fruits and vegetables in the mornings. And, the occupation there used to be like seating. The occupation actually put like a bar along the seats so nobody could sit on the actual stone seats anymore. And like again, we're touching on like how the occupation oppresses even in the lightest manner. They see people gathering, they try to stop them, so they put in like aggressive architecture to stop them. Now, moving on, going back, to the Aqsa complex, you go around and you see a lot of this, daily life. A lot of the locals go there. On the picture on the right, you can see pilgrims who have gotten permits to come in, pray, and then fly out to Mecca to perform Umrah, which is very interesting to me because you do feel like the Jerusalemites don't get access or aren't given permission, but some of them do. And this is something else that I wanted to touch on. Like one of the things that I learned when I was out there is that like only Jerusalemites have access to this site, and only like a certain tier of people, like women, students, young children, older men. Like certain men aren't allowed in. But the thing that really got me was that like people who live 5 to 6 kilometers away from the Jerusalem and in the West Bank or in Ramallah can't access their sites. They can't come and they can't see it, and they have to get special permits from the occupation, and it's very strict. It'll be like you have 3 hours to come in and go, and of course they have to cross the barriers to come in. So if it's delayed, they might not even get in, because if they come back late, they'll never be given a permit ever again. So as I was like exploring these sites, I was actually meeting people like Palestinians who've lived in Palestine their whole lives, who were like, this is the first time I've ever actually come to the Haram and I've actually experienced it. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I've refrained in a lot of my photography of showing the occupation. It's important to me. One thing for me is like, I grow up seeing this happen. Like, you see the violence, you see the destruction, you see the guns and the the oppression of the people constantly. And so for me, I wanted to depict in my photography a different world, a different aspect of this. So like I will point that I stopped here when I was saying this story, but like the occupation was ever present, and these are images to show you that they're always around. But like I intentionally in my books and in my projects wanted to elevate the Palestinians and like show you their lives, like this is what they live like and this is how their lives are. On a quick note, I added this photograph again just to like show you like how the occupation plays games with them. There is an officer, police on site whose job it is to stop the kids from playing football, and he collects the balls from the kids and punctures them in front of them and throws them away to stop children from playing football on the Haram. So moving on from that, not only did I photograph daily life inside the complex, which was my focal point, but I also explored the old city and like it's tiny streets, it's a neighborly feel. Everyone knows each other out there. Everyone has cousins outside, and of course you roam the different harats, which is like streets or neighborhoods. One of the important facts that I learned early on was that this idea of there being 4 quarters in Jerusalem is a colonial invention. It was an Englishman who came and said to himself, well, other cities in the West have quarters. Why doesn't this one have? And he created this. And whenever I like to like challenge people, whenever like people talk about quarters, I say to them, how come there are more mosques in the Christian quarter than there are in the how come there's more, all the most important Christian sites and landmarks are in the Islamic quarter? Why is there an Armenian quarter and like nobody else? And a friend of mine wrote a book about it. If anybody wants to ask me about it, I'll tell you about it later. But like he said, there's about 17 to 21 quarters, if you want to call them, but we call them harat. But like there's social cohesion, and there's like that's the thing. Touching on what I just said, like there's a lot of interaction. Like there's no such thing as a quarter when it comes to Jerusalem. People, Christians live alongside Muslims, live alongside Jews, different denominations. You have people like this was like one of the first tourism cities as well in the Arab world, obviously because it's so important. So there's a lot of influx of like Muslims from around the Islamic world who come in. You know, you have like the Moroccan quarter, which means the North African quarter. You have, you know, Indians, hospices that have been there for 200 years, and everyone's mingling and everybody knows each other, and they're all very neighborly. So I just wanted to move on. Let's moving on from that. And I want to touch on the thing, like a lot of you pick these pictures are very candid, but what I do say is a lot of the time I would meet these people and I would talk to them and I would learn about their, you know, their lives, and they would tell me stories. Now, this is the Cotton Merchants Gate, and when I finished my project, it was December 2009. Now, going on a tangent, like many of my tangents, I'm a huge book collector, and I love collecting books about the Arab world and the Islamic world, architecture, photography books. And my whole time, you know, visiting over the last 2 years, Jerusalem, I kept on like going to bookshops, looking around bookshops, asking friends and people I've met, you know, where can I find a good book about al-Aqsa Mosque? You know, I want to know about the history. I want to know about these inscriptions. I want to know the different buildings. Where's the history of this stuff? And you know, some merchants would show me like Arabic books, which were very weak, you know, very bad photography and things. And I got to the point where I was like, it seems that there's no book, and I started researching it. And it was really funny because at this moment, on the picture on the right, I was standing here, and this light bulb came to me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be the person who does this. It's clear that I've got the access, I've got the, you know, the resources now with my other books. I'm going to do this. So I ran back to Jordan in December 2009. I think you guys know what's coming, and started majorly researching the Aqsa Mosque. And I went back into my archive and I started pulling out images. And I did, like, you know, I spent a good 2 months, January and February, you know, talking to historians, doing research, pulling out as much information as I could about all the landmarks inside the complex. And I was like, oh, there's this weird thing called COVID going around. I should, you know, maybe get a move on. So I think in March I went back and I spent 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks in Jerusalem, as like, you know, quarantine was approaching, documenting the sites. And you know, I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, spent hours, 10 hours every single day, documenting every single platform, prayer platform, tomb, school, arch, inscription, mosque. Again, going off on another tangent here, this is the Rahma Gate, or also known as the Golden Gate, and this has been a fixation of the occupation for years. This is the building that they want to take over and turn into a synagogue or a multi-faith center. And we're going to have to go off on another tangent, but like there's definitely like a conflict between the occupation and the Palestinian and the authorities, like the Hashemites, over this compound. And people who know it, people who don't know it, you know, because the conflict is that the occupation wants to move in and take over the compound, and it's never been more under threat than it has ever been this moment. And you know, in response to that conflict, the Awqaf, or the people, the religious authority who's in charge of the compound, the complex, sorry, have utilized every single square inch of the mosque. Every building is turned into an office or a school or a prayer hall. So this is the entire inside of the thing, in order to stop, you know, because if it's left abandoned for 5 minutes, you know, someone will move in and try to take it over. Rolling back, I continued to document, and I started to get access because people would notice that I was there. You know, the local security, like, what are you doing? Like, you've been coming and going constantly. And I would be like, well, I'm documenting it for like a book. And they would welcome me in and like give me access to sit in different places where we, you know, document different inscriptions and things. And continued. Here's another thing. For example, like these are Ottoman era cells where Sufi prayer Quranic readers would have hung out, and they circle the central platform. But obviously, you know, there's not that many visitors to the complex anymore. So these are now offices. So one office will be like, you know, the sanitation. The one will be the security office, and so on and so forth. And then in the northern section of the complex, these are all originally Mamluk and Ottoman schools that have remained so, and there are still children learning in classes in every single one of these buildings. And you can see the layering, as I mentioned before. You can tell like everything is layered on top of each other, but with a sort of respect to the previous version that was there. Here, and of course, again, like, you know, you go back, even though you're documenting the site, you still meet lovely people. These are pictures of the locals, who by the end of my exploration all knew who I was. These are the security guys, and you know, they would come running up to me and say, "You took a picture of Abu Ahmed. I need you to take a picture of me." And as a photographer, like, I like to respect, because there's like a sort of a morality when it comes to taking pictures of people. And I always say to people like, "Oh, you know, give me your WhatsApp. I'll send you the pictures in a few days or in a week or two when I get back to Amman." And you know, you meet the kids who are coming through all the time. Of course, the kids are the best part, because they're always very curious, like you are. So like, you'll find them in different corners, or they'll run up to talk to you. But also, you know, you see moments of life out there, because it's still an operating space. So, you know, here's a funeral that I caught, and this is a platform connected to the central building called Mastabat al-Janaza, where the body is placed, where people go in and pray. But also you see, you know, newlyweds coming with their clothes to be, you know, proudly get photographed in front of the mosque, as well as like Quranic readers, school kids coming for day visits, you know, who've gotten permits. You have elderly people doing lessons and reading Quran. Now, as I said, like, as time progressed and the project built and built and built, I started to get more known, and I approached the royal court, the Hashemite court, and asked them for permission to get into areas that I couldn't access prior. And they wholeheartedly agreed. And I ended up doing like, not a deal, but like, as a thank you to them, donating my archive to them to fight against the occupation. One of the people that I did meet, who's very important to me, is this gentleman called Bassam Hallaq, and he's the head architect and this is definitely an architect's office, as you can see. And he's responsible for the past maybe 30, 40 years of the development and, you know, growth of the complex. And he ended up taking me around all the hidden rooms and areas. So underneath the main mosque, there's libraries. There's two major libraries in the site. One of the old mosques was turned into a museum, an Islamic museum. But above all, also, like, you know, you have manuscript restoration labs, because, you know, the Awqaf and the mosque was the center point for all life and culture prior. So all the old documents are here. Again, like, touching on the fact, this the story about like the occupation. It took them 3 to 4 years to get this lab equipment out of like permission to actually move it in, and they stayed in the storage in Palestine for 4 years before the negotiations could have before the Israelis let them in. You'll notice that there's a mihrab on the right, not a mihrab, a niche, a prayer niche. This is actually originally a mosque as well. So just going back to showing you how every section is utilized. There's a stonemason in one of the rooms here. You can see stonemasonry here. And again, like, interference. On the right is a pulpit, an Ottoman era pulpit, where the head stone was broken at one point during protests. And if you see on the left behind the table, it's sitting there in a sort of arch. That's been sitting there for the past maybe 2 years. This is the last time I was there. It's been sitting there because they couldn't get permission to put the stone back, the new renovated one. And when I was going around with this Bassam, he was telling me different stories about how, like, things happen. This is in one of the underneath prayer areas called the Marwani Mosque. And one story that I love sharing with people here is that if you see on the right, there's a window and a grate on the bottom. He said to me, "Do you know how many years we've been trying to install this grate over that window?" And I was like, "How many?" And he's like, I've lost count. And I joked with him. I was like, "You guys are in control at night, just 2, 3 a.m. sneak in, put the grate up, and leave." And he goes, "Oh, Bashar, like, you have no idea. Like, we did this once, and then within 4 hours, the army came in, took it down, put it back down there, and left without saying a word to us." And it just goes to show you how they go. Anyway, moving on from that, as I was walking to and fro every day, I would take these snapshots. And, like, by the way, just so you know, like, the original snapshots that I took were for that exhibition, but the rest of these were all for my personal archive, because, and not like just for me. I see these moments and I take pictures of these things, and they sat in my archive. So now I ended up publishing the book back in 23. So during COVID, I bogged down and I worked with a amazing professor called Robert Schick, who has maybe 40 years of experience surrounding Jerusalem. He's an Islamic scholar, and he did the writing for the book. And I ended up going after COVID lockdown went, like immediately as soon as lockdown cleared, I went back, did one last exploration in 23 and got the pictures. The book was published in 23 at the end of 23. And here's a little bit of fun information for you guys. You know, I spent over 3 months exploring the city. I donated the images to several organizations, and in order to get the book published, because a lot of issues with concerning this, because it's a flashpoint, I couldn't get the book published in the major publisher. Nobody would accept, even though I had sent off the proposal to about 20 publishers, and I was I was desperate to get this book. Not desperate, but like I was headstrong. I wanted to see this come through. So I ended up crowdfunding it and raising money to produce the book myself. And I ended up doing 2 launch events, one in Amman and one in Jerusalem. The book, I produced 1,600 copies, which unfortunately is sold out, but I'm currently in negotiation with a publisher to do an international edition. Now, just moving on to the last part. So after I published that book, I was focusing on trying to get it published, but then the genocide happened. And I don't know about you guys, but like I felt this with a lot of my community, that it just shocked us all to our core, and we all felt so helpless. And I mean, the last time I was in Jerusalem was like 3 months before the genocide began, and I didn't have the heart to go back, and I just felt so helpless. So in 24, I was talking to a friend, and he said to me, Bashar, like I was saying to him, I don't know what to do. I feel whatever I do is not going to help. And he's like, in times of struggle, the artist makes art, the writer writes, and the photographer photographs. Do what you can. And I was like, that's amazing. I'm going to actually make a book dedicated. I'm going to go into my archive. I'm going to pull out these pictures that I'd taken of daily life and create a book about it. And the idea was that this is going to be a purely fundraised book. I ended up producing 1,600 books and raising around $55,000 so far. I think we've crossed the $60,000, and I ended up donating the funds to MAP Jordan for medical aid for Palestinians, and Medical Aid UK as well. And well, that's the end of my journey. I've added some links here. If you want to buy, like I should say, like the book I said is 100% goes to Palestine. So if you're interested in buying it, you can go to Maqam Books if you're in the West, or you can go to my website and you can buy it off of my website in the Middle East if you're around here. And yeah, ask me anything. I'm just gonna end it on two beautiful hand-drawn pictures that I had an illustrator commissioned of the city and of the Haram, so when we're talking, I can point out things for you.
No, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Really, it really touches your heart when you see the city in that way, because I speak for myself, because I've never been to Jerusalem, and I know only like a couple of friends who've been. And when they tell you about it, they tell you about the intensity of being around, being sort of watched, or being sort of always on guard as a result of the soldiers that are always sort of like putting you. Yeah, and I'm sure it is the same, of course, for the Palestinians. But what's really amazing is that the sanctuary, this like al-Haram is actually a haram in every sense of the word.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a place for all activities, and it's a very touching sort of I don't know what to say about it. It's very touching, because in many countries, maybe even Muslim countries, you don't see their very important mosques playing these roles, without mentioning specific names, even though they're not under occupation or anything. And to see that the Haram is actually fulfilling that role of being a museum, of being obviously first and foremost being the Haram, but being a museum, being a library, or libraries, having even workshops, for craftsmen, amazing. And seeing like all the children and like people doing the janaza, the funeral prayer, but also like, you know, getting married there. Amazing.
It's a fully functioning complex, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's incredible. This is why I fell in love with it. Like I've traveled the world, I've been to
Mm,
religious sites around the world, and I photographed them, and none of them gave the vibe or the feeling that this place gives you. This sort of
mm,
safety and community, while also being like a sort of like a fortress from the horrors outside, you know.
yeah.
Um, and you see it all the time, even with the people. You know, they come up and they share their food. "Oh, hello, sahla, where are you from?" This sort of thing, you know, and it's very cool.
But the beautiful thing, it extends also beyond the walls of the complex itself, or beyond the 144 acres, as you mentioned, because the city itself, people know one another, and there is that social cohesion that, again, is missing from a lot of cities that have modernized or have been under the influence of capitalism and modernity, and the way that we see it across the world, really, but specifically also in Arab and Muslim cities. So it's really amazing to see that.
For sure. And like I said, yeah, you're right, because it extends. And like, I think it's also like a bit of a product of the occupation, because the occupation imposes these horrible rules on the local population that,
Mm,
and somehow it's turned into the space. Like, you know, the like you said, the capitalist aspect is not entered the space because of, I feel, because of the occupation. When I was doing my research and writing for the thing, you know, I mentioned in my talk, like, Jerusalem was one of the first actual tourist, like, you know, like destinations. And you hear about, like, you know, the haram used to have different families in different quarters who were the official guides of every area, and each family would create their own mythology around, you know, like, you have Buraq, you know, the you would have the arches of the Buraq, and you have the staircase of the Buraq, and you have the Masalla al-Buraq, because each one wanted the Buraq for themselves.
mhm,
And like, and these really cool, interesting things is because these stories expanded, and like the people, like, they became legends in themselves, you know.
mm,
In one of the sections of the mosque, there's a passageway, because the city's built, you know, is layered, as we know, like, built cities layer up. So, you know, 1,000 years ago, the entrance of the city used to go up into the compound, and so there was this
mm. And
passageway that was
where would it be in that map where we have here?
on the haram, so bottom left area. So that area, there's this
Mm,
place called Masalla al-Buraq, and it's actually originally like an Umayyad era passageway.
mm,
Hasn't it, but of course, because we have to utilize every single facet of the place, it was turned into a mosque. But there's a ring from an Ottoman era where you used to tie up your horse, and this became venerated. It entered religious like mythology, because it's old, and people would go in and they would say, "Oh, hada masal al-buraq, that's a ring. That's where the Prophet tied up the thing, the buraq."
mm.
Very, and it,
Nice.
like, layers and layers of storytelling that enter into legend, and like, and it's incredible.
Mm,
But yeah, like I said, rolling back a little bit, the vibe of the place, the atmosphere, the interaction. You know, everyone knows everybody. Everybody. You know, there's, by the way, there's also families living on the edges of it. There's houses around the area.
mm,
So that's also very interesting to see, like, the families, you know, associated, like, and they're just walking in and out. Yeah.
mm. Really fascinating.
Uh,
I believe that not all places are created equal. So, I mean, there is that functionalist mentality that says that, well, I mean, there is space, so you can utilize it. You can build a hospital or a casino or a school, wherever you want. But places like Jerusalem, especially like in the Haram itself, shows that there is something else. And may I say, it could be a sentiment. It's not just I mean, it could be part of it as a sentiment, like the outer part of it is a sentiment, but there is definitely a spiritual experience or sort of a lived experience that we can go through in these types of places. They have an impact upon you. Sometimes we're really conscious of it, and sometimes it's not conscious. And I think
Unconscious, yes. Yeah.
yeah, I think it has shaped also the city. The city itself has been, in a sense, protected, like its social fabric, and of course, it has been under a lot of stress. But that's the hardship of basically the occupation and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality of it, that there is something still really intact, and that's really wonderful. Okay, I should not take any more time, but we can. I don't know if Ammar has a question or if we should open it up. Yeah,
well,
Ammar.
I mean, usually I do have questions,
Beautiful, huh?
but I
Beautiful,
think
really beautiful presentation.
Very, very beautiful. I usually
Thank
have
you.
questions, but I think just looking at the pictures really, really just transported me to Qut Sharif. So thank you very much, Bashar. Inshallah, in a few more minutes, if I do have a question, I'll let you know. But thank you very much. Truly, I feel really, really like a different feeling has overtaken me. And I'm really, really inside of Jerusalem right now. And it's beautiful how you went everywhere, not just the Muslim part, you went to the Christian parts, one perhaps the Jewish parts.
I
And
did,
I think
yeah.
it's stunning. It's stunning how such, um, a city with so much history is squished into that little small city. I
Yeah,
mean, to us,
yeah.
it's small, but like at that time, I'm sure it would be huge. So thank you, Bashar. Truly, truly. I
Just on a
think
quick note, like on the second book, the charity book that I did, two of my favorite things that I came back to me is one person came back and she was like, "Now I understand why my father loved that city so much through your
Mm,
pictures." And the other one was she was like, "My grandmother started crying because she saw the streets that she used to play on. She recognized them."
yeah.
So like that was like that was my big takeaway from that project.
Even for someone like me, I have never visited Jerusalem. Of course, I have that sort of like, linger or like, sort of longing for it. But it's still like, your stories and like the pictures really affected me in such a way that it made me feel like something else. I've never
Connected.
had that. Yeah, yeah. I've never had that feeling with Jerusalem before because you only see it in the news. And perhaps it's really refreshing to see it, to see how the architecture of the city, the urban planning, the spiritual buildings of the city still shape it till this day. And that's the in a sense, these buildings stand the test of time. They've been made many, many centuries ago, and everybody has put their sort of fingerprint on it. And yet you still have that sort of profound effect on people. That's really the true mission of architecture, I believe. I think there are a couple of comments. I think there's a question. So Susan Ryan says, Bashar, thank you, an extraordinary effort and archive. I was so fortunate to visit Jerusalem and al-Aqsa in 1995, many years before I permanently moved to Egypt. I had only one roll of film with me, but countless memories from meeting people. Your photographs and stories stirred my heart so much. Yeah, thank you. I will try to get a copy of the book here and look forward to your larger mosque project as well. So that's from Susan.
When I end
Someone
up publishing it in like 10,000 years from now.
No, we hope inshallah much, much sooner. Also, Muhammad El Gindi, who's not me, is
very
basically
confusing.
saying, yeah, it's a bit it was confusing for me too because like you started sending something like emojis, and I was like, I'm not doing that. But yeah, but he's saying very interesting journey, Bashar. Thank you for this beautiful presentation. Photography is such a rich language in my perspective. Is there a destination where you'd like to do a similar project or a moment in history you wish you could travel back to and capture a specific story or event? I'll leave the latter to the imagination.
Oh man, I know exploring the Levant at any point before my lifetime would have been amazing. That's the second part. I have running projects constantly as a historical photographer. Like for example, I have my mosques project. I'm just rounding up a project about Japanese castles, for example. That's where I've just been working in Japan for the past few years as well. But I found myself looking at the Arab world more and more. Like I really want to. One of the projects that I really want to do is, and I've been working on it slowly, but because the world region's in so much conflict, it's kind of difficult and it gets interrupted. But I want to do defensive structures from the Crusader period, Islamic
Nice.
and
Mm,
Crusader, and I've documented a considerable amount. But like I said, like conflicts like the civil wars and like the wars around us, I constantly keep on stopping. So that's the one I would love to see through, and I keep on working on it. For example, this year I've been redoing Jordan. I managed to photograph the citadel in Aleppo last year. I'm planning on going to southern Turkey next year in spring to photograph the castles along there. So yeah, that's one of the other projects. I have many running projects all the time.
And
Nice.
I
We
think
have a
when I got
comment
in touch with you
from
first, you were in Wales as well. You were also like telling me that you were doing some photography there.
Oh yeah, that was just exploration for me because
Okay.
I was doing three charity events with MAP out there, and in between I rented a car and I went around Scotland, and then I went up to see the castles in Wales because I'm also very interested in them. And one side note, of course, Mr. Tangent here, the incredible the architecture and resemblance between the castles in Wales and the castles in the Levant. because obviously they're from the same period and from the same conflict, but you
Mm,
walk up to them and you're like, this looks exactly like the one in Tripoli. Like what
mm,
it's very interesting to see, and like except like it's not desert, it's green.
mm.
The position of them.
And that's really interesting.
Nice.
So like it must have been a connection between the craftsmen like doing the masonry
Yeah, I
and
mean, like all these
um,
crusaders built their castles out here and then moved back to their kingdoms back in Europe, and you brought their architects and their techniques and their siege techniques back with them.
mm, mm.
Nice. We have a comment from, I think I'm saying it right, Sven Hunt. I'm so sorry, Sven, if I said it wrong. I was fortunate to visit Jerusalem in 2022 after a failed attempt in 2019. And I agree there. Tense yet peaceful, intense. I got the Noble Sanctuary book in 2023 via Launch Good and been following the
Oh.
Between Moments project for over a year with Launch Good and YouTube. And I absolutely loved both books of your photos. It's an amazing and very important collection. This talk added a whole new layer of projects, and I thoroughly enjoyed hearing your story. Thank you, Bashar. Truly, thank you very much. Haha, close enough.
Okay. Now I thought I recognized the name.
Amazing.
You know everybody
Anyways,
who bought your book.
Yeah.
I think we'll open now the platform for anyone that wants to speak or ask questions, maybe by voice, knock yourselves out, maybe raise your hands, or yeah, there you go. Manuel, go
If
ahead.
if
My
uh,
brother is
if
here.
if you can also like introduce yourself, tell us like where you come from and if you're like what do you do in terms of arts or photography or generally speaking, just a brief introduction.
Hi, Bashar. How do you do? Mohammed, Hamar. So for me, this was a surprising presentation because I'm new to this old world. I'm the founder of Architectural Place, and that's how I heard the lecture was happening. You
It's nice
see,
to meet you.
sometimes I think that in the West we don't give um, the focus that it's right now on the Middle East is all about politics, and as you know, naturally, politics they overshadow beauty and pretty much everything else. And so the focus that you picked was something that I try to defend to other areas when I talk about the relevance of beauty, which is you decided not to focus on, let's say, the bad parts, which is the nightmare that has been overshadowing their lives in Palestine, and not only for the last, well, we could say since their inception, but for the last decades in this fashion. And I think that photography is such a powerful medium that when you said that you had trouble regarding the publishers, you said 20, I believe, that you were
Yeah.
trying to talk to them.
20
And
proposals.
it's so odd because the topic on itself, not to talk about the quality of the photography, but if we talk about how important this is, both from the religious standpoint and pretty much for Palestine, it's a topic that it's everywhere. People talk about it, they give their stances, they're so powerful, and everyone has a theory and a position, and they're stronger than the previous one. But no one talks about the people in the daily life, and I was never able to see this type of photography. It's really strange. You see so many publications. I understand the American ones because they mainly have a side, and so they're not
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
be interested on showing the beauty and the daily lives. But on the other hand, you have so many publications that could go after this. I would say it's a golden opportunity, you see, because this type of photography, it's not easy to get there. It's not easy to, get the access.
No,
I was completely dazzled by the first picture when you said you arrived at night and it was completely empty. It's just we don't get that
no.
opportunity anywhere. If you go to Europe, even in Paris at 4 a.m., it's going to be crowded somewhere. So it's I want to thank you for this because it was pretty good. We don't have access, and the West tends to stand on. I'm from Portugal and England, and so there's this sort of condescending look to everything that is not European and American, and this is the truth. They think, oh, we have so many things here, and I think we're missing on so many cultural elements, and I'm thankful that I was able to be here. So
No,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Manuel. Me and Manuel are friends, so thank you very much, Manuel. Very, very kind words. Does anyone here have any other comments to say? Maybe a question? Okay.
I think there is a
Mohammed.
question in the chat, yeah, Ammar. or
Okay,
is it a
cool.
comment?
I think it's a comment. Says by
It's a
Baqiya.
comment, yeah.
Baqiya. She said, absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Bashar. Went to the old Lahore Wall City today, and the gates you have shown me has reminded me of the beautiful gates of Lahore, even though they bear no similarity. Interesting, interesting, very interesting observation. Lahore is nice. Lahore is very nice. My wife is from
I,
Pakistan. Well, she's
I
half
haven't been
Pakistani.
yet, sadly. I've been to India, but I'm also want to go to Pakistan very soon, hopefully,
Yeah.
because
And by the way,
that's where the
Bashar, if you
mosques
can,
are.
by the way, Bashar, if you want, maybe if like next year going to Pakistan, maybe like the year after, come to Bahrain.
I've already been. I did an exhibition there like 2 years ago.
What? What a shame. I wish I knew I would have come, to be honest.
Yeah, but I
Amazing.
like Bahrain a lot, and especially like I was going to tell you earlier on, like it's quite a beautiful place, and like even though it's got small historical sites as you mentioned, but they do really focus on it really well and do a really good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Okay,
think also
we'll give
like
her a
with
few more
regards to
seconds.
yeah, with the Baqiyya Saliha, I think what is really interesting is you do see that very sort of like, big diversity in Islamic architecture. So it stretches from Andalusia to obviously Morocco, or you can say North Africa, all the way to Egypt, and then the Levant, and then obviously like, Central Asia, and then like India. So you have big diversity of looks, and though they are very different, if you put someone who's familiar with the Islamic doctrine, once they're there, they're familiar with that place. They don't have to kind of like, think, what is this? Oh, that's a place where you behave in that way. They already know what it is. So in a sense, there is that, unity behind that multiplicity. And there's that
Uh,
kind of like single spirit tying things together, harmonizing that. And Bashar, I think, would have would
yeah.
you like to say something like
So,
about
so
that?
that's a very interesting fact because I remember how I mentioned like I feel one of my many titles that I've given to myself is a cultural broker, but like I feel this, like as someone who's
Yeah.
grown up in the Levant, when I was in Old Delhi, I felt at home. I felt even the chaos and walking around in the markets and inside in the the castles and things like this. And as in Uzbekistan, even though I don't speak the local language, I was still
Mm,
walking around as if I was local. I felt it,
mm,
and I feel like that gives like that confidence that comes from like this sort of knowing that this is similar to my world, this is similar to my people. I come from a family of traders who I'm assuming have visited all the same places I've been over the centuries. Like I feel like I can walk around and like, like you're saying, like there's this sort of like it's not a blueprint. How would one describe it? Like again, it's sort of this sort of atmosphere of this sort of old city atmosphere that in a place like this that you get to feel these sorts of things.
yeah. I do think like, people have never met, like the architects or maybe the craftsmen may have never met, but there is definitely something about the sort of like, we can say the spiritual dimension or the metaphysical dimension of architecture, because the architecture does impact you. It does bring up sort of something within you, like you can say latent possibilities, like something that is sleeping within you, just as advertising does. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say I give the simple example of seeing a McDonald's sign and remembering the taste of the fries, for instance. Like some people have that. So people in the past also knew that the impact of architecture, and the impact of architecture is that it's a constant reminder of the doctrine itself, or basically the divine presence, as these people of the past have seen it. This is not like, it's not like my take on it. There is a comment from Swen. So Swen is saying, yeah, good point. The architecture style is completely different, but there's a commonality of big city gates and naming the gates after the place the road leads to. Like Delhi Gate in Lahore, Lahori Gate in Delhi, Damascus Gate
Damascus
in
Gate.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Also,
do.
another comment. Yeah, please, yeah.
I do experience when I go around these places there is a commonality, especially you're saying that there's like a difference, but like for example, South Asian architecture and Central Asian or East Asian architecture, there I do see similarities, especially when it comes to the mosques, for example. You have
Mm,
standard elements. You have the dome, you have massive arches, you have huge spaces, you have water elements, you have
mm,
minarets. These are, I know these are like basic, but they have their own twist, and they have their own materials that have been acquired from the local areas to build them. This is why we have beautiful red mosques in Pakistan and India, and like,
Mm.
and like, but for example, Uzbekistan, the tiles, but the elements are still there, And for example, around the central mosque, you usually have the market, and like I can bet you sometimes, like for example, one of the things I learned in Tunisia, it was beautiful. The mosque, the rings of markets. The further away you go, is the less sacred. So the closest thing to the mosque would be the Qurans and the religious books, the teachings, and then the next street down would be the wedding attire, and the next street down would be this, and you'd notice this as well in other parts. For example, like in Jerusalem, the closest market to it sells all the religious stuff, but also sells the sweets for the kids for the Eid, for celebrations. And I noticed that when I was in Delhi, for example. So like there are elements. Maybe I'm jumping, but I feel it, sometimes.
Yeah, in the past, I think that's how they used to divide markets as well, but I don't want to be taking a lot of time for my comments. So Dina Fatima says, stunning visuals and powerful storytelling. Thank you, Bashar. Between Moments truly captures the vibrant heartbeat of Jerusalem. And hopefully you will have the opportunity to come to Indonesia in the future to photograph the beautiful Islamic architecture here.
It's on the list.
On the list. He's accepted the invitation.
Yeah. It's funny because I met a 93-year-old legendary photographer the other day, and I was saying to him, like, how is your energy levels? Like, are you still keeping it up? Like, or like as like every decade, have you slowed down? And like the organizers from the talk were like, no, we're taking him down to Petra tomorrow. So I was like, oh my God, I'm in trouble because I'm probably going to be doing this until I'm 90 and like traveling all around the world and taking pictures.
No, it's really exciting.
We have a comment from sorry again, Sven. He said, yes, there is definitely similarities too. A lot of the big mosques in India and Pakistan that are known are built by the Mughals, which took Central Asian elements like the dome shapes, Persian elements like the Iwan, and blended them with local elements. What is it again? Local elements and materials. Traveling around the world and taking pictures till you're 90 sounds like a dream. Oh yeah, it sounds like a dream until like you have to like sleep in those very, very thin what's it called? Like hostels. Like man, that's a nightmare.
Oh no, I'm too old for that now. I'm too old for that.
MashaAllah, Bashar, you look very young. You look as young as MashaAllah, Muhammad looks younger than me, and he's in his MashaAllah 40. So
Okay. We have let's see if there is more questions. If not, then we can maybe wrap it up. And
yeah. All right, cool. I feel like that's enough time. Before we end, I just want to do a small what's it called, announcement. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll be introducing the next speaker. Me and Muhammad are still working on the poster, inshallah, but it's going to be related to primarily that of traditional architecture in depth, perhaps for, like his drawing and his works. So please, fair warning, the next session is going to be a bit intense, but I think it's going to be very nice, very, very nice. Me and Muhammad have fallen in love with his content, and I think I wish we could do this more than 1 hour, 2 hours, but it's a bit difficult. So hopefully, yeah, next Muhammad, give us like a small summary. What do you think?
No, yeah, inshallah, next time is gonna be someone who basically is really dedicated to traditional architecture. He himself draws with his hands, so he doesn't use programming, or he doesn't use like softwares to draw. I think so. We're still discussing the topic, but what we're discussing is meaning in architecture, because what we see is thematic sort of elements that strike certain chords in different places around the world. As we mentioned, there is this commonality, even though you can see clearly that this is maybe sort of Andalusian architecture, or like Egyptian architecture, or let's say Levantinian, is it?
Levantine,
yeah. Levantine architecture, they're quite similar, but you can see that there is a thread connecting them, and that thread is basically that sort of layer of meaning. So so the speaker, inshallah, will be speaking about that. It's Abdurrahman al-Zain. He's a student of Abdul Wahid al-Wakil, Professor Abdul Wahid al-Wakil. He's a great master of traditional architecture. So we're looking really forward to that one coming up soon. So stay tuned with us. Otherwise, yeah, inshallah, it will be really useful. And otherwise, I'm really, really grateful for Bashar and the beautiful presentation that he shared with us today. It was wonderful to see Jerusalem in that way, really alive. And despite everything, it really still carries the meaning. The al-Aqsa carries the meaning of a sanctuary in the true sense of the word. Really moving presentation, to be honest. Any last words that you'd like to share with us, Bashar, before we
I
close?
was just the last note. I was thinking like hopefully this lessons can be learned from this. From like what I could show you, in future designs of like sanctuaries, and future designs of parks and the elements that go into them and things like this. Hopefully we can learn from it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point.
All right, perfect.
All
I think
right,
we can
take
end the
care.
recording now. Okay, we will now end the recording now.